you, it is not the Savannah show. So today I'm giving a presentation on the human side of engineering. My name is Savanna-Rei Rennalls. I am a civil engineer by trade, project manager, educator, keynote speaker on a mission to humanise the engineering profession. Honestly, it's such a pleasure to be here with you today. The last time I stood at the PWI was about 10 years ago, competing in the Text Factor competition. Back then I was incredibly nervous and incredibly anxious. So fast forward to today and I stand here feeling the complete opposite. I feel confident, I feel proud, and I feel genuinely excited. And I'm a lot more sure of who I am and what I stand for and why this work on the human side of engineering matters so deeply. So my work is about helping people in engineering not to just perform, but also to flourish. Because when you put people at the heart of engineering, which we are, performance then follows naturally. Retention improves, well-being rises, and innovation has the opportunity to thrive. So I know engineering, it's not just about bridges, infrastructure and railway, it's about also building people. And when we take care of people, the projects will essentially take care of themselves. So my career has taken me from the classroom to the community to the construction site. When I finished my master's in civil engineering, I was rejected from every single civil engineering graduate scheme that I applied for, every single one. And what I had to do is I had to pivot and I became a teacher. I became a design and technology teacher, teaching in a school, truthfully, where students were more likely to go to prison than they were to go to university. But being a qualified teacher was more rewarding than I had ever imagined, because I saw what happens when you actually believe in people and put your heart into people. I helped turn students' grades from D grades to A grades, and I helped by just seeing what they're capable of and also teaching my subjects to make learning accessible for them. After that, I served as a British Transport Police Special Constable, where I essentially was on the front line of public safety. And this experience taught me how to stay calm in chaos. Teaching taught me that also, and how to make decisions that genuinely impact people's lives. So what's funny is that I used to describe myself as a shy person. And when I look back now, a shy person probably wouldn't find themselves wrestling and a complete stranger on a custody cell floor trying to prevent them from self-harming. And they definitely wouldn't be walking through a packed train at London Euston searching for a man reportedly carrying a machete. So maybe I wasn't shy after all, maybe I just hadn't found my voice yet. In my next chapter of my career, I became an engineer and then a project manager. And I worked on some amazing infrastructure projects, as well as working with some incredibly talented people across the industry. But the journey was not what I expected it to be. Somewhere along the line, I discovered that my leadership philosophy was people first and then performance will follow. And I've learned that what it means to lead, and not just through plans and programs and spreadsheets, but also through leading people. So my leadership philosophy is essentially at the heart of everything I do, from coaching to speaking to my brand, The People's Engineer. And today I just wanted to share a few stories of my engineering experience, my real lived experiences. I also wanted to share with you my human blueprint so that we don't forget about the human side of engineering. Some of these subjects may be glazed over or uncomfortable or may not typically be what's spoken about, but I genuinely wanted to share the world through my lens, and my hope is fairly simple. It's that something I share will resonate with you, something that I share may challenge you, and something that I share I hope will inspire you to see our profession and maybe yourself a little bit differently. A few years ago, I hit that point, burnout. I had done everything right. I had worked hard. I said yes to everything. I did a lot of late nights and I ticked every single box. But one morning I sat on the edge of my bed, hunched over, and I just could not get up. Not because I didn't care and I didn't want to go to work. It's because I'd given everything that I had, and not one person noticed the person behind the hard hat. And that's when it clicked for me that we spend a lot of time building things, a lot of time building infrastructure, but we forget sometimes to build up ourselves and we forget to build up others. So since then, I've made it my mission to change that and remind our industry that resilience is not about running on empty. It's about creating environments where people are supported enough to sustain their passion and not just survive it. So today I would like to strip back the rails, strip back the sleepers, strip back the ballast, and talk about what it means to really create a space where people can thrive. I'd like to share with you what you can actually use when you go back to work, or maybe some of those of you who are retired, something that you might be able to reflect on. This is what I call my human blueprint, because succeeding in engineering isn't always about just pushing harder or working longer hours. It's about remembering that we are humans and this industry should be able to help people thrive and not just survive. So the first part of being human, H. H is for hear and honour voices. For me, hear and honour voices is more than just listening. It's about really hearing people and not just their words, but what's underneath those words. It's about paying attention to people whose voices don't always carry in a room, the quiet ones, the new graduates, the ones who think differently, and the ones who might not look like what we're used to seeing in engineering. At my worst point of burnout, I was really struggling and I took 3 weeks off work. Honestly, I can say that I didn't really recognise myself. I'd lost a significant amount of weight. My hair was falling out. I had breakouts of eczema all over my skin. And I would cry behind the laptop sometimes during meetings. The worst thing is that not one person asked, "Are you okay?" Like, really, are you okay? Instead, what I got was, "Sunny, you look really skinny." And that was it. And that moment taught me that sometimes we think pushing through is keeping calm, carrying on, getting the job done, but it's not. Sometimes strength is about stopping, resetting, and admitting that you're not okay. But wonder, why do we fail to notice, take action when we might see someone struggling? A few weeks later, I was fit enough to work, and I obviously hadn't learnt my lesson because I was still working in the office, typing away, headphones in, usual stuff. And then I noticed that there was a colleague sat further down in the office, someone in a different team. He was one of those people in the office that people labelled as being a bit different, keeps himself to himself, quiet. I took the opportunity to introduce myself to him. And I said, "Hey, buddy, you're working. You okay?" And he looked at me for a second. He said, "No, I'm not actually, but thank you for asking." So I pulled up a chair. He told me that he'd recently been diagnosed with autism, and he'd always known something was different about him, but he never understood what, and he never understood why. He added, "I'm not happy on my project, and when work isn't okay, I'm not okay, because I don't really have anything to go home to. Work is my world." That conversation stayed with me. And the moral of these stories is that behind every hard hat, behind every screen, behind every spreadsheet, there is a person just like each and every one of us in this room here today. And sometimes honouring voices isn't just about hearing who speaks the loudest. Sometimes it's about hearing the silence and listening to the voices that we don't hear enough, and sometimes the voices that we don't hear at all. Well-being is something that we talk about a lot these days, and it's for a good reason. So here's just a friendly reminder, just to check in on yourself, on your teammates, and also on those around you. I started out as an engineer. I was really proud, I was really excited, and I was inspired. I'd made it into this world that I had worked so hard to be a part of. But once I settled into this industry, I realized that there was a lot more to it than a book or a degree could teach me. Suddenly, I started hearing things like, can I have your number? Are you single? I bet you've got a great figure behind that PPE. Are you married? Can you take off your hard hat so I can see the rest of your face? And believe it or not, these are some of the politer things that have been said to me in the office or on site. I'll never forget one particular night shift. I was working on a ballasted track renewal, and one of the site staff made a string of inappropriate comments that left me feeling incredibly uncomfortable. So I thought I did what I thought was the right thing, and I reported it not once, but twice to two different site managers. And the responses, one said, sorry, can't help you, it's out of my remit. And the other said, and I'll never forget this, come on, don't pretend like you don't like it. In that moment, I realised how easy it is for people experiencing difficulties and challenges in the industry to be silenced, and how often harassment can take place in environments that gets brushed off as banter or part of site culture. And as one of few females on site, I felt very alone, very unsupported, and incredibly upset. When I had this escalated to the senior leader at the time, he said, wow, I didn't realise that this still happens in our industry. I've got two daughters who are interested in getting in engineering, and I wouldn't want this happening to them. We talk a lot about attracting more women into this industry, but attraction genuinely means nothing if there isn't retention and protection aren't there to back it up. So if you're a manager or if you are a leader in this room, I ask you please to look out for your people and protect them, because safety is not just about PPE or safe systems of work. Make sure the right systems are in place, and that when someone does speak up, that they are heard, that they are believed, that they are respected, and that they are helped. Because when I'm asked, so what happened to that person that harassed you on site? My answer is nothing at all. And unfortunately, that's not really good enough. But here's the thing, it can change. And it can change for others going forward, including that senior manager's two daughters. And it starts by each and every one of us creating spaces for people to feel safe to speak up and for leaders to take action and listen without judgment. So when we hear and honour every voice, we build an industry that's not just stronger, but safer, fairer, and more human. Look at this classic example. One person sees a 6 and the other person sees a 9. Neither are wrong. They just look at the situation, but from different angles. And that is what perspective is. Diving into my teaching days, when I was a teacher, I got performers about each of my students, my new classes, to tell me a little bit more about each of my students, what their predicted grades are, if they had any learning difficulties, what their behaviours are like, who's good to sit next to who. And these were all written out by teachers of what they thought of the students. I remember one particular GCSE class where I was really not looking forward to that class because there was one student, from looking at his performer, that looked like he was going to be an absolute nightmare in my class. Predicted D grade, potentially extremely disruptive. In the classroom, he was very polite. He wandered around a bit, and on his work, every time he handed it in, he only had his name on it. And as a new teacher, I decided I wasn't going to go by what people said about him. So I had a straight up conversation with him, and I said, "Buddy, is everything okay? Is there something that I can help you with maybe in class?" And he said, "Miss, I just don't understand." And I thought, how many times had he said that before? And how many times have people really listened? So on that sheet of paper, what teachers said about him, he was a 9. He was disruptive, hard to deal with, not good enough. But when I listened and I saw the 6, he was a student who quite simply just didn't understand, someone that needed a bit of help and someone who needed things explained a little bit differently. So I adjusted how I taught, and I tailored every single lesson to make learning accessible for him. By the end of the year, he got an A. The headmistress asked me, how did you do it? How did you get him from predicted D grade to an A grade? And I simply just smiled and said, I just listened to what he needed. When he got his A grade, he said, Miss, do you really think I can be an engineer? And I said, absolutely, you can be anything that you want to be. I hope this highlights the importance of perspective. People are not their labels, they are not their grades, they are not predictions, they are not comments on a piece of paper. And when we take the time to really truly see and hear about someone, whether it be students, whether it be colleagues, we understand things from their perspective and their world, and it potentially helps unlock their potential. And that's why what the H in human is about: listening, understanding, building systems and cultures where everyone can feel safe and learn to grow. You, uplift, don't undermine. Team culture, it's not just about hitting targets and finishing projects on time. It's about how we make people feel the moment they walk through the door or when they log on to work. Are they thinking, I'm really happy to be here today? Or are they thinking, oh no, here we go again? Too often, feedback can often feel less like guidance and more like an attack, or microaggressions creep in and make people question whether they belong in the industry. And when that happens, people stop speaking up, people stop contributing, people stop being themselves. So we might hit deadlines, but trust, psychological safety, that's all gone. So we've all known that person, maybe in a team, a leader, who's really great at pointing out everything that goes wrong, and somehow never seems to notice the things that go right. And here's the truth: people don't necessarily grow from criticism, they grow from confidence. So quite often, a little can go a long way. And a quick well done or a simple I've got your back can mean the world to a person on the receiving end. And that's exactly what it means to uplift people. Constructive feedback helps build confidence and not fear. And it's about making people feel safe, welcomed into a learning environment where they can grow and not feel undermined. I heard that saying, don't judge a book by its cover. Yet in engineering, we still do this. When I first came into the rail industry, I was told the railway is not a place for a woman. Those exact words. And honestly, it tickled me, but that phrase never left my mind. And then a year later, I wanted to manage a team. And I was told flat out, you can't lead a group of men because you're a woman. Being young and naive and not seeing any other female managers in the office, for a period of time, I actually almost started to believe that. Almost. One day I spoke to a female mentor, someone who had already walked my path, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. And I asked her if what was said to me was true, that I can't lead a group of men because I'm a woman. And do you know what she said? She said, what absolute rubbish. She said, so without her allyship and without her words of wisdom telling me that I was capable of being a manager, maybe I would have never have tried. Or I would have pivoted into a different industry. And that's the danger, isn't it? When leaders, colleagues, peers fail to see beyond stereotypes, and when organisations assume that someone can't do the role because of their job or because of their gender, their background, or for any other reason. And what happens next? We lose talent, we box people in, we stifle potential, and we send the message that diversity is not valued. So sometimes the very people that we might assume cannot do the job, they often bring a different insight that nobody else sees. The quiet engineer, the apprentice with the different approach, the woman in a room full of men. Sometimes they're the ones that spot the hazards, identify the opportunities, see the solutions, and it's because they see the world a little bit differently. A year later, guess what happened? I found myself leading a group of men. And I noticed something extraordinary. Every time someone had a question, they would go to my male counterpart, and he never knew the answer, so he would always send them to me. And I realized that people weren't initially coming up to me because I didn't look like the person in charge. And let's face it, when people are asked, what does a lead engineer look like? Someone like me probably doesn't come to mind. The highlight of that project was not the fact that I installed new technology. It wasn't the fact of or the level of engineering assurance that I achieved. And it wasn't the fact that I was able to lead a gang that I had never led before. The highlight of that end of that shift was the member of staff who came up to me and shook my hand and said, "You've done an amazing job. You should be proud of yourself." Because I was told that that path wasn't for me, and here I was standing, proving them wrong. So here's my uplifting challenge to you. Have a few seconds to think about someone in your team, someone in your office, or someone on your project who could benefit from that little uplift. Send them a little note, maybe a little well done. It's simple and it's free. And this is, essentially recognition matters more than you realize. And when you uplift people, they don't just feel better, they do better. They innovate, they stay, they lift the work, the team, and the culture that we work in. Sometimes it's the little things that go a long way and can make a difference between someone staying in our industry and leaving. I've seen both sides of team culture. I've walked into teams under pressure, silence rooms, no eye contacts, no good mornings, no laughter, just people surviving day to day. And I often think for some of them, work isn't just about a paycheck. It's their sense of connection, it's their sense of belonging. And when the environment is cold and hostile, it doesn't just hurt people, it hurts productivity. But I've also seen the other side, the kind of team where people check in on each other in the morning. Someone brings in biscuits, thank you, Mike. People laugh, and laughter speaks into solving problems, where people speak up not because they have to, but because they want to. And I always ask myself, and I ask you now, which team would you rather be in? Which team would you trust to build something that lasts? Leadership and team culture isn't just about hitting deadlines and ticking boxes. It's genuinely about creating spaces where people feel comfortable to perform their best. Let's talk more about this in the M. M, model empathy. Now, this is a big one, model empathy, and I really do think it is a game changer. Early in my career, I really struggled with leadership, and I looked around at what the leaders were doing. And I thought, this is how it's done. Strict, distant, all about authority. Even when it didn't feel right, I'd just do it and copy it anyway, because honestly, I didn't know any better. But here's the thing, copying that kind of style derailed my team. Conflict bubbled up, morale dropped, people were disengaged, complaints came in, performance went down. And yet I thought, isn't this what leadership is supposed to look like? And then I kept hearing this phrase, show up as your authentic self. So one day I stopped performing leadership and I stopped pretending to be someone that I wasn't, and I started being myself, and I started being a leader. And that's when I realized that culture is not written in policies and it's not written on posters, it's actually written in our actions. So it's how we talk to people, it's how we react under pressure, it's how we give feedback, and it's how we admit when we're wrong. When we lead with empathy, we really began to see people, we really begin to acknowledge their experiences, their challenges, and their perspectives. And it sends the message of you are safe, you are valued, and your contribution matters. So when people feel like that, naturally they want to show up as themselves, take risks, collaborate, and feel that they can innovate and achieve. So empathy, it's not a soft thing. In fact, it's the opposite. It's very strong, and it's strong enough to be able for us to build up trust and build up teams that actually last. So what I'd like you to take away is that some people think being empathetic is quite a challenge. But being able to model empathy every single day is easier than you think. Ask questions, listen more than you speak, admit mistakes, celebrate efforts, and show that you care about the people doing the work and not just the work itself. And because when you do that, everything else will fall into place: performance, innovation, and a great team culture. Now, it wouldn't be a great presentation if something didn't go wrong, but that already happened, the tech. But anyway, I will tell a different story. So here's a story from when I was working with as a British Transport Police Special Constable, probably in my first month of being in the job. Remember that man that I mentioned, the one with the machete? But it turns out there was no machete. He'd actually escaped from a mental health unit in Scotland, and I'm still asking where the machete came from. It was one of those brutally hot, humid, muggy London days, no breeze, just sticky and sweaty everywhere. And myself and a few other officers were standing outside of custody with this man in one of the vans. He was very agitated, frustrated, red in the face, cuffed and screaming. And I thought, okay, model empathy, think human first, Savanna. So I begged and pleaded with the team. I said, guys, can we just crack the window open just a little bit? Maybe he needs a little bit of fresh air to calm him down. 2 centimetres. It was a measly 2 centimetres. They cracked the window open. But hey, for me, I thought that's progress. I feel like a hero. A few minutes later, a gush of spit flies out that man's face and lands square in one of my colleagues' faces, full frontal, right on him. And I froze, he froze, everybody froze. And that's when I realised empathy is not just about being nice to people. It's about understanding the full situation, anticipating consequences, which I didn't, and communicating effectively. So whilst my heart was in the right place, I clearly hadn't considered the consequences or the impact of those 2 measly centimetres. So yes, I tried to model empathy and it went spectacularly wrong. But the takeaway is modelling empathy means thinking, observing, learning, and acting. Appreciating diversity. When people picture an engineer in the rail industry, I know most people wouldn't picture someone that looks like me, a black woman. The first time I realised I was one of few in the room was when I studied civil engineering at Warwick University, and we stood out of the whole cohort. And I remember sitting there thinking, do I belong here? Have I made the right choice? Are people going to like me? And then a thought came through, which is someone has to be first. Someone has to challenge the status quo. So I decided that I would do that because I was genuinely interested in the subject. And the future of this industry essentially depends on how we look after people, how we lead them, how we invite new faces, different backgrounds, different perspectives into this industry. Own your lens. What does it mean to own your lens? It means that every single one of us carries our own story, our own journey, our own upbringing, different experiences, different backgrounds. And this is what's helped us see the world through our lens. And that relates to perspective. So when we own our lens and when we respect the lens of other people, we unlock the opportunity for insights and innovation and create an impact that not one single perspective could ever achieve alone. So I 100% encourage you to embrace the way that you see the world, your background, your experiences, your culture. Celebrate your challenges, your wins, and share it all. Your lens is how you interpret the world around you, where you've been, who you've met, and the challenges that you've overcome. And the thing is, no one will ever have the exact same view of you, but that's the beauty of diversity, which means that nobody else can offer what you have. So it's really important that we appreciate diversity as well as individuality. Owning your lens is very powerful because it stops us from shrinking into somebody else's version of what professionalism is and what professionalism should look like. When we start to create spaces where people can show up as themselves, what happens again is people are able to bring fresh ideas to the table. The new graduate, they're able to bring fresh ideas to the table. The neurodivergent thinker, they're able to see patterns that nobody else can see. And from someone from a background that's rarely represented in the industry, they can also bring their ideas to the table as well. So your perspective is essentially your advantage, and that's exactly why I'm here today, to share my lens and my learning. I was once asked to speak at a safety event, and I chose to talk about perspective, diversity, and inclusion. And I was told by the senior manager that diversity and inclusion is not relevant, and that diversity and inclusion has got to do with safety. In my opinion, diversity and inclusion has everything to do with safety, because if people don't feel included, they will not speak up. And if they don't feel safe to challenge, mistakes will get missed. So in our industry, mistakes cost lives. So inclusion can be like a subtle switch, just a slight change to help us keep on track, and potentially consider that if one voice is lost, that potentially means that's one insight lost as well. Sometimes the different perspectives is the difference between something going wrong and something not, which can be a very expensive or terrifying experience. And it's needless to say that I've made it my mission to get on that presenters panel and teach about the power of perspective, diversity, and inclusion, because clearly there was a lack of understanding, not at just a junior level, but at a senior management level as well. And I slowly started teaching my department how and why diversity matters. Diversity is about seeing different minds, different experiences, what different people bring to the table. And when you've got a mixture of voices and allow them to be heard, you are able to spot problems faster, design smarter, and also keep people safer. So diversity has got everything to do with safety, because it's not just a nice to have. Sometimes it can actually be a lifeline. Then, nurture growth. Once upon a time, I had a manager, and he believed that feedback was about breaking people down. He thought that pressure is what makes diamonds, but I didn't feel like a diamond. I actually felt pretty crushed. Every mistake became a lecture, and every success was brushed off, and slowly my confidence started to disintegrate. I looked for a different mentor because I realized that this situation wasn't working for me. It was actually breaking me, and she was actually such an amazing person. She saw people, she noticed their effort, and she believed in boosting people's confidence and not breaking their spirits. So when I got something wrong, she didn't ask, "What's wrong with you?" She asked, "What went wrong and how can we fix it together?" And that one word, together, meant everything to me, because thriving starts when people feel supported and not scared. So I made myself a promise that day, and I said that I'll never be the voice that knocks someone down. I'll always be the voice that lifts people up. The introvert. There was once an apprentice that I worked with, and he was incredibly quiet. So quiet, I heard in one of the meetings that the way people were talking about him in a negative way. He doesn't speak up enough. He's not engaging. He's boring. And I thought, hold on a minute. His personality does not mean that he's incapable. He's just lacking confidence. So I reached out, and I checked in on him and I encouraged him, and he slowly grew. He came out of his comfort zone. He started doing things a little bit differently. And that same quiet apprentice slowly became that person that wasn't overlooked. He was being noticed for his insight, for his skills, and for his ideas. And at the end of the placement, he came up to me and he said, "Thank you. You've made me feel like I belong here." And that's what nurturing is about. It's about seeing the potential in others that some people may overlook. When you engage with people, when you protect them, when you ask them if there's okay and give them space to grow, you don't just inspire them, but you don't just inspire them, but you also change how other people may see them. So nurturing talent and how we grow the next generation of engineers, if we don't invest in people, we end up losing them, and not just to other companies, but to other industries as well. Got another story for you. It's my last story for you. Take it back to the classroom again. This is the T in STEM, technology. So myself and a head of department, we had a meeting to discuss which students that we wanted in our GCSE technology class. And at this time, my confidence was growing, and I had a strategy that I wanted the students who were keen to learn, not the ones who that I was going to be spending half of the lesson managing their behaviour. I wanted to teach. It was quite simple. So me and the head of department, we were literally trading students like they were Pokemon cards. You take that one, I'll take that one, matching students to our teaching styles. And to me, it was scientific. It was a genius approach. And it came down to that last student. And the head of department looked at me and he said, "Do you want this student? He doesn't talk much. He's not much bother. I find teaching him really boring." And my obvious question was, is he going to be a problem? And the head of department said, "No, not at all." So fast forward to the end of the academic year, the head of department and I sat down to review all of the students' work and calibrate them, the scores and the ratings. And he was flicking through the work, and then he stopped and his eyes went wide open, staring at this beautifully sketched, designed birdhouse. And he said, "Whose work is this? This is amazing." I said, "Yeah, it was that kid that you didn't want." And he said, "How did you get him to do this?" And I said, "Well, when you move a student into the right environment and a teacher who understands them and believes in them, suddenly they begin to thrive. It's nothing to do with their ability. It's just the environment that they're in." And that, my friends, is exactly the same as a workplace. People don't just suddenly become more talented, more seen, more heard, or more valued. They become motivated. So the lesson is, if you want your team to thrive, think about the right culture, the right support, is the right leadership in place. When people can do what they're capable of, and feel confident in being able to do so as well. When you go back to the word human, think hear and honor voices, uplift, don't undermine, model empathy, appreciate diversity, and nurture growth. This is how we create cultures where people don't just perform, but they thrive. And if we forget about the human side of engineering, we don't just risk weaker projects, but we risk losing people, their creativity, their health, and their contributions to an aging industry. When people ask me, what does the future of engineering look like? I feel like they expect me to talk about technology, AI, automation, drones, robots, all of it. But honestly, that's not the part of engineering that most excites me. For me, I like to look at the human side of engineering. And this is a future where safety includes psychological safety and diversity, And inclusion is not just a policy, but it's a practice that's built into our culture. So when I talk about engineering a human future, it's not just a big fluffy idea. It's about taking those everyday moments that lots of people experience and help shape building a culture. It's that graduate that's given the time to learn because they've been given patience and somebody's believed in their potential. It's the site manager who checks in, not because it's policy, but because it's something that they actually want to do. It's that engineer that's encouraged to speak up when something doesn't look right, because they know that they're going to be heard and not humiliated. It's the woman on site that doesn't have to prove that she belongs there because the culture already tells her that she does. It's about the neurodivergent teammate who's not asked to fit in, but given the space in which they can work their best. It's about the returner, the career changer, the quiet thinker, the one who's overlooked, finally being seen, valued, and trusted to do what they do best. And it's the team that celebrates progress and not just perfection. So before I wrap up, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for reflecting. And thank you for being able to see engineering from the human side through my lens. My work helps to help people lead, connect and turn rejection into resilience and build workplaces and spaces where people can thrive and be themselves. So if anything that I've said has resonated with you today or allowed you to see something a little bit differently, I'd 100% like to stay connected. Very much.
Just thinking through things, going back to my time as a maintenance manager, where I had a static workforce because it's asset management maintenance carries on, same sort of people doing the same sort of thing. I reckon it took me the best part of 2 years to get really in with them, just over 100 people. To the extent if I turned up in the middle of the night, they were pleased to see me, not worried. Moving on from the decades, one of the things that concerns me now, and it's a live concern, is how much is being done remotely. And it's people are not seeing each other. Yep. I've got a problem in that one of my colleagues who is fairly new to us, I've been out with them 3-4 times on site visits. And I'm pleased with what they can do, to the extent that if we'd done another joint visit, I'd let them take the lead. But I've repeatedly been asked by the manager and the UK manager about whether they're really worth having. And I keep saying yes, but I just don't think that there is enough personal interactions now. I mean, I've actually only seen my own boss personally in person twice in 18 months because they're based in Derby and I'm based in London. But this particular member of the staff isn't based in either. And it worries me also that our graduates are only in the office 1 or 2 days a week. The ones we took on in September, they are actually sitting in the London office, which is good because it allows me to wander over, as I did earlier this week, and I've given one of them an exercise, which I was interested to see what he'd just been on a training course. So I pulled him over and spent a couple of hours working through what he'd done based on whatever. But I can't do that with the other person because they're never there. And it worries me that people are making judgments from what they see in Teams meetings and not able to actually work with them as individuals. And I see this as a growing problem, is getting people to come into the office to engage. The trouble is, if they live 70 miles away, it's then difficult. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, I think that's an absolute great question. And I think just seeing a lot of nods going on in the room, I think a lot of people resonate with what you're saying. I would say I'm currently in a team, you know, it's a bit of hybrid working when you go into the office. Sometimes it's just you there. Well, hey, where's the rest of the team? This is our office day. So I think the same way us as society adapted to COVID and working remotely, and you know, that was a really big change for us. I think we're gradually trying to adjust and work to how we can work better remotely and how we can work hybrid. I think it links back to team culture and leadership. Different teams, different offices, different companies do things a little bit differently, but I think the decision ultimately comes from who's leading that team, what you want to enforce, what you want to implement, what you want your team to look like. And that's not to say that it's going to be easy, but the best you can do is at least try to build that culture that you're looking for. And I also believe by leading an example. My office day is a Wednesday, and I make sure that I'm there every day on a Wednesday. I absolutely think that being present and that social interaction, that human interaction is important. And I feel like, you know, if you're there, hopefully people will start to replicate that behavior as well.
It's just so different that in my previous job, which was pre-COVID, I was basically had a queue of people at my desk because they wanted to talk to me, which is great. Now I'm like, I at times, apart from the marketing lady who shares my pod, there's actually nobody else on our wing. You know, it's all very well talking to the marketing lady, but that's not quite, you know, that's not doing the work, as it were. It's just, I see it as a growing problem. And if people are making decisions on the basis of who they see on teams and how people perform on teams, I mean, I normally put a strange background up, from one of my own photographs, just to get things going at the start of meetings. I've got a range of my own photos I just put up just to try to get a talking point. But what worries me is a lot of people just don't even react to those and say, well, what's that? It just feels wrong.
Yeah, I think it's definitely not something that's going to change overnight. And I think it's really small behaviours that will, like small consistent behaviours that may help to implement that change. For example, sitting on online meetings and I'd be the only one that's got my camera on, and that's a bit awkward because then, you know, I feel like everyone's just looking at me. So I think it's great to encourage everyone to put on their cameras so we actually feel like, at least virtually, we're talking to other people in the room. Does anyone else have anything else to add around remote working and the challenges?
So I'd like to sort of pick up and echo what John just said. I, like John, am old enough to remember a time well before remote working, when you basically attended work every day, every night if you were on night work or just work, whatever. Yeah, or both, yeah, whatever. And in TfL, it was the 18th of March 2020, when we were all told, right, you're all working from home unless you're operationally imperative to keeping the railway running. So I wasn't operationally imperative, so I started working from home. And even someone with my number of years at work found working from home a bit of a struggle sometimes for various reasons. Not practical reasons, but I don't know, psychological, emotional, whatever. So it must be really difficult. I think, I'm looking at it from like the other end of the working life, I think it must be really difficult for young people who've started work and come straight into this, I'll be fairly bold with this, alien, almost unhuman way of working, because we as a species survived millennia without remote working, and it was all done through human contact, personal contact. So to echo sort of what John said, if we are now losing that, and I think that, in my personal opinion, is that that can be, not saying it is, I'm saying it can be unhealthy. I think it makes it more difficult to get a team culture, team spirit together. I'd encourage less remote working and more working in a shared space, as it were.
Yeah,
My personal opinions.
yeah, I think I would 100% absolutely agree. You know, staying at home, it's just not the same. Seeing, touching, smelling, going out, doing the night shift, experiencing that culture. I 100% agree with you both. I don't know what can be done to change a bit, but it's something that I guess if there's things that you can do within your team's suggestions, then absolutely try and push them forward. In my team, I've had various new starters, new joiners, and I've had no awareness that they've even joined the team. So, we're going backwards. Where's the introduction to starters and leavers? So, yes, it's not right, and I definitely call it out because it's not just important to the people who are part of the team, but it's also important to the people joining the team. So, absolutely.
In replacing remote.
Now I'll go for you and then I'll go for Jim.
All right, so when you've got remote working, one of the things, obviously, you're not going to bump to people in the kitchen. You're not going to be able to talk to them. So in a way, you have to sort of like replace that to some degree, and really have. I mean, some people have done it daily. Some like every other day, basically check-ins for the team, or even one-to-one check-ins. That like in the thing to actually create that sort of atmosphere of working as a team to replace what you would. It feels like nearly making it formalised, but that's mainly just because everyone has to log on at that time. In the past, you were actually, because you were sat next to the person or across from the person, it was
We were.
yeah.
Does it work?
So when Mike walked out of the thing and said, "Where's that report?" It was a quick answer. Or we saw each other every day. You know, you sort of got to recreate that nearly in a formal little mini. I mean, one of my teams had little team meetings, and we're doing. Each person had to do the quiz each week, or each other day, or different thing that was passed around in that period to try and keep it as a team essentially. And then you could add people into that quite easily.
Yeah, I do definitely to adjust. My team once, a different team, we were just encouraged to be back into the office. And it was really great to see the office and people that were making effort, and there were lots of familiar, friendly faces in the office. And then I had a team meeting. Everyone was online, sat at their desks. And I just thought, hold on, we're all in the office. I just stood up and I said, guys, should we not just go to the breakout area and have a face-to-face conversation? Why are we talking through computer screens? And oh yeah, that's a great idea, Savanna. But yeah, it's just like we're going backwards.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm now old enough to retire. I'm thankful for that. I don't know, but I was doing remote working pre-COVID. I was doing assessments at home, right? Working from home. I'm going to leave. So I handed my notice in, and when I actually finished, everybody else was working from home. It was bizarre, actually. But I think back 15 years, it's not in 15 years. I knew a young lady who wanted to join the rail industry. She studied physics at Manchester, applied to Network Rail graduate scheme, and was rejected. And the telephone interview stage, that's like a remote work, isn't it? But then they realised actually she'd worked one vacation in a performance team. She'd worked for First Capital Connect, I think, in the depot one vacation writing process. So perhaps we'll ignore that telephone interview and we'll bring you in for an assessment. And actually, she's had 2 director roles in Network Rail. She just left Network Rail and joined the Elizabeth Line train operator as a director. So they nearly missed something through remote interviewing. So it's not actually not a new thing. We have to be so careful that we assess the person, not the voice.
Reminds me of something that one of my colleagues said the other day. She was applying for a new role, and it was a role where she's supposed to work in person, but they wanted a remote interview. And so she challenged it, and she just thought, but you're encouraging us to come into the office. Like, should this interview not be face to face? She didn't get the job, and she thinks that it's because she challenged the way of interviewing.
Do you think there's a limit on the number of people that you can lead and influence directly? And does it, an interesting time back to your time as a teacher, is there a limit on the size of the class? That's actually, is a point where it just becomes, you can't actually make a difference?
I would say for me, some impact, even if I can, so my classes were about 20 to 30 people. You know, that might be similar to some people's teams, if not more. And I feel that if I can make a difference to even a small percentage of children in that classroom, then I think I've done a great job. In terms of a team, it's hard. I think there's always going to be the people, maybe even a 10% of people that just don't really want to be here, or don't want to be on board. But as a leader, I would ultimately do my best to try and encourage and steer people in the right direction.
Not, can Mike to do the vote.
On me. Well, Savannah, thank you very much for coming here to give us your presentation this evening. Certainly, this is an issue that I've come across when I was working. There seems to be a tendency sometimes for people to get fixated on the new process or the new bit of kit or the new big yellow shiny thing with wheels. Wait a minute, there's people over here that are going to have to, you know, operate it and maintain it and replenish it for its consumables, and got to train the operators that this is not an ordinary train, it's a special train, it runs it. So that people get locked onto the technology, which you mentioned, and forget about all the people, the actual human beings who've got to make that technology work. You pointed out that by helping people to flourish, you can help the business to flourish. I think thought it was a very good point. And if you put people first, then usually performance will follow. But we need to build up the people, as you said, not just the asset, the infrastructure. We need to build up the people. And I would say maintenance is the same thing. When you've got an asset, it wears out. You need to maintain it. And we need to do the same thing for our people because they need to be maintained. You mentioned about listening to the meaning of what is said, but you also need to listen to the meaning about what sometimes is unsaid. You mentioned a guy who you working very late in the office one night. And I've occasionally said to people, look, you could work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, you wouldn't get all the work done. And you very quickly destroy yourself. So don't do it. Yeah, don't do it, all right? And you wouldn't get thanked for it either, okay? You'd probably get moaned at because you've now caused the company a problem because you're ill and you're not performing. So don't do it. You also said about there's got to be protection for people. This is very true. My daughter works in the motor industry. She's been subject to misogyny many times. Customer picking up a new car. Oh, do you come with it? Yeah? Yeah, it goes on everywhere, not just in the rail industry, unfortunately. Uplift people, don't undermine them. Very, very good point. Very good point. Because if you undermine people, they're not going to perform. And treat them negatively, they're not going to perform. And when they can't perform, they can't develop, and they just get into a spiral, and it causes problems for them. It causes problems for you as a manager, so you're not doing yourself any favours, and it can cause problems right the way through a team. Diversity is a very important issue. I've worked in teams that were very diverse, and I've managed a couple of teams that were very diverse. And because they were diverse, the teams were greater than the sum of the parts. They all brought different knowledge, skills and experience and aspects and perspectives. And because of that, they were better than if they'd all been the same. Imagine if we'd all be the same, yeah? I mean, the world would be possibly a quieter place, but like it would be boring, wouldn't it? Working on a railway, as we all know, can be a physically and mentally challenging environment. And that's why people need to be looked after. They don't need to be nursed, okay? They don't need to be sat down, there, all your right cups of tea, yeah? That's not what it's about. It's making sure, basically, they're okay, yeah? You mentioned about nurturing growth, and you touched on people who are extroverts and introverts. I used to have a couple of guys in one of my teams. One of them was an extrovert. Let's say his name was Danny, okay? And if something went wrong on that with what Danny was doing, you knew about it, okay? Because Danny would go, ow, throw down the pencil, it bounced off the desk, papers up in the air. Danny would swear a lot and shout. And basically, you sort of duck and let the fallout go over your head. And then once he'd settled down again, he'd go and say, what's the problem, Dan? Can we sort this out? So Danny, great guy, very capable guy. Relatively easy to see when Danny had a problem, yeah? There's another guy in my team. Let's say his name was Dave, all right? Dave was equally as competent as Danny. He had different skill sets. They were great, part of a diverse team, yeah? But Dave was very introvert. So you didn't know immediately when Dave had a problem. He would just, over the course of sometimes 2 or 3 days, get quieter and quieter and quieter, be less engaging, until in the end, I realised he would be sitting at his desk just like this, not actually doing anything. So I said, sort of quietly sidle up to him and say, all right, Dave, how's it going? You know, and then you start to take him out of that situation and try and help him and get through whatever the problem was. So introverts and extroverts, interesting people, but you need to help them in different ways. Where does it get me to? Oh, turn the wrong page. Sorry. You mentioned about providing the right culture and environment, recognise people's strengths, but help them to overcome their, I won't say weaknesses, help them to overcome their problems. And I'll close by echoing what John said earlier. Is remote working making this more difficult? My personal view is that it does. I believe Sir Alan Sugar has told his people, right, you're all back in the office, you know, in that way he has. Okay, that's one approach. I think personally, remote working was one of the things that eventually pushed me into full retirement, apart from the voluntary stuff I still do for the PWI. So yeah, it makes it more difficult. But thank you once again. It's an overlooked subject, in my view, but really appreciate you coming here. Would you please join me in a round of applause to thank Savanna for coming?
It says next meeting is 10th of December. Hopefully we've got Anthony Harris.
He tells me he'll be here.
We'll get him confirmed and get a notice out on what our subject will be. Some people may want to adjourn with us to the grapes, Mike.
Well, I'm going to a retirement do in Birmingham.
Oh, right. Some of you may be going to a retirement do further away. Others,
The grapes.
grapes. There's enough of us. Okay, thank you very much.
Well done, Savannah. Very good.
Share it this time, so I'll probably catch that.
Yeah. Good luck tomorrow.
Sorry?
Good luck tomorrow.
What's that with it? When you take the blood out of me and
All right.
sell it off next week.
Yeah. Won't see you tomorrow, but
I'm not saying take them, you can have one. I don't know.
I've had 2 already.
So?
You don't see it. Guys, I've got a shoot tonight, so say hello to Martin, anyone else I know.
There you go.
All right, catch up with you soon. Thank you.
Right, Jonathan, do you want one?